So you're lucky because this is the first time this session hasn't sold out in 7 years. So what did I do wrong? Come on, what did we do wrong?
They're here. We can't ask them.
So you are the smart people at VMworld, from our opinion. So I always like to warn people that we're going to go through 120 slides. Anybody been at our previous sessions? Am I making it up? No. If you don't want to sit through 120 slides, you should not be here. Go, man, go. I don't blame you. I'd be at the blackjack table right now. The minimums are low.
On the way out, though.
I don't think it's going to feel like 120 slides because a long time ago, I decided to have fun. I've been doing technical presentations for 30 years, and I get tired of the drone. So we're going to do stuff a little off the wall. Last year, I offended 2 people out of 1,000. Oh, well. I said, don't let the door hit in you know what on the way out. I'm being kind. I didn't say the word, though last year I did. But we're going to try to have fun. The technical content, we're going to try to give you a lot of technical content. And so we're going to get started. Anybody know where I'm from? You should know by now. I'm a Patriots fan. I know you're probably not. Oh, well, get over it. Doesn't bother me at all. You're just sorry you're not us. So this is the slide about me. I've been doing Oracle since version 2. I am an Oracle ace today. I tend to lean towards SQL Server more often than Oracle, so someday they're going to kick me off the Oracle ace island. I am a Microsoft MVP. I am a VMware vExpert. I write for different publications. I'm very active on Twitter, though I haven't been so active this week. I was paid to come here by Spectrum Enterprise Navisite, and I'm going to tell you something really interesting. They bought a lot of my books, and they're going to be giving them away. I'm leaving here, and I have about an hour to do a book signing. And my understanding is that $40 book you'll be able to get for nothing. So it might be worth whatever they require. I don't even think they're going to require you, just show up. So I would highly recommend if you want the book, you should take the time to actually go down to their booth. I believe it's 212. Okay, and I'm very active in the user community, and I'm the original Oracle person author. Suffice to say, I have a big mouth. I'll share my opinion, and I don't claim I'm right all the time. And the other thing is, I use different guest speakers over the years, and last year I asked Dave, and I introduced him because it was the training wheel version. Because when you do 120 slides, it's not easy. And finishing on time. And Dave blew me away with the quality and the material he brought together. And so I'm really excited to have Dave with me. And if you've got some SQL Server virtualization issues, I'm telling you, he's good. You should get one of his cards, which are right up front here. Sorry, but you deserve the introduction.
That's awesome. My name is David Klee. I'm also a Microsoft Data Platform MVP and a VMware vExpert. I've been virtualizing SQL Server since 1999. I'll let that sink in. Back in the day, you had some problems. I actually own a technology consulting firm called Heraflux Technologies. We've been around for about 4.5 years. This is the biggest thing that we do, performance tuning availability, and you're going to get a fire hose of all the tips and tricks that we do day in and day out.
This is the legal disclaimer. This is my opinion. It is certainly not the opinion of Spectrum Enterprise Navisite. I can't speak for whether George Pin. I'm just telling you, you got the legal disclaimer. Okay, you can call Saul if you have any issues. He'll take care of it for me. I always, as an author, like to talk about the book, so I'm being held up by the paperweight, which is the Oracle book, is holding up the SQL Server book. That's the one I recommend for obvious reasons. A friend of mine is a cartoon artist. He got me in a lot of trouble at United Airlines because I had these funny cartoons about United Airlines, like somebody in a suit of armor getting ready to get on the plane. I had 500,000 hits, and United Airlines gave me a stop and desist. They didn't like me picking on the poor airline. So if you go to michaelcorey.com, they're still out there. Just put my name in United Airlines. They are an absolute hoot. They didn't ask me to take them down from my blog, so I haven't violated any of the rules. So if you want to have fun with the airlines, they are great. A lot of the material from this is from the, oh, look who photobombed us today. Barney. I hear there's Barney haters out there. How do you hate a purple dinosaur? Really? No, it's really funny. I hear that you were telling me, right? The millennials have a real issue with Barney. I guess. So anyway, a lot of the material from this is from the expert workshops that are run by VMware. I've been doing them for 7 years. David has been a presenter, actually, and an attendee, which says a lot about David's capabilities. And so this is a bunch of people from the Oracle one. This is a bunch of people from the SQL Server one. The last one we just did was in Ireland. They're great events. If you have a loud mouth, you're very publicly on Twitter, social media, you do a lot of blogging, you're active in the user community, you present at conferences, you should talk to David or I, because we can nominate people. They pick up all the expenses, 3 days, they bring the people in that wrote the code sometimes. This is a reference slide. You're going to see me fly through reference slides. When you go back to the 120 slide deck and you're trying to find something, this is kind of the order or the firing sequence of the hose. And the deck's going to be available. You want to define a monster VM for these people?
To me, a monster VM is the things that we fear. Realistically, anything more than 8 CPUs, quarter terabyte of RAM, a lot of storage, these are the big resource consumers.
And the game changer really was, starting in vSphere 4, they started focusing on database virtualization, which is a classic monster VM. Though there were people like David, what version did you start in?
VMware Workstation 1.
So there were people like David that were on the bleeding edge.
You mean glutton for punishment?
Yeah. So we're going to cover, this used to be different decks, but I get tired of maintaining 220-something slide decks. We're going to talk about Oracle. We're going to talk about SQL Server. The issues are the same. We're going to emphasize monster VMs and some lessons that were learned. Anything we should add to that?
Yeah. Biggest thing is you can do this. You can do this comfortably.
Yeah, and that's the whole point of this when we first started doing, was to educate people that it was okay to virtualize your databases. And so Project Capstone came out a couple of years ago here, where they took the largest HP Superdome, they took a flash storage array, right? And they took an Oracle database running Unix and they tried to push as big a VM as they could through it to see what happened. And it was interesting because when they did the launch, I thought as a geek, this is great stuff. 480 threads, my God. Imagine the VM you could do with this thing. And along the way, we kind of learned some things about virtual machine behaviors. You should probably talk about this. I see your DVDs up there.
The biggest thing is I want you to be able to prove how fast these things can go. Small, large, whatever. DVD Store 3 is another great utility out there. It simulates a production workload, and you can go replay this against any production database server that you've got. We've got a how-to guide out there for free. I don't ask for any contact info. I won't spam you. Just out at DVD Store.
But the idea was to take this free software, run orders per minute, somebody shopping in the DVD store, and see how big we can make the VMs and see what happened. And then obviously put the brightest bulbs to tune this thing to see what happened. 480 threads. And in fact, the point of this slide is it scaled just great. And in fact, here's another slide. And the other thing to get from this is that the flash storage array really allowed them to scale up the CPU. One of the things I find interesting, and you experienced this firsthand, is they took a pure storage array. We did it the expert program. We had a bunch of SQL Server MVPs, and they couldn't make this machine break in a sweat. Now, I know this guy could make that machine break in a sweat, eventually. You could bring any storage array to its knees. But do you have any comments on that? I mean, you were there. You saw it.
It was a blast. 15 people hacking around trying to crush a storage array, and we were killing the SQL servers. And the array just goes, whatever, no big deal.
And so Project Capstone, there was a bunch of things that jumped out at us, right? They used 2 VMX Net3 NICs. They used a para virtual driver, right? They used no pinning, but they used preferred HT, and we're going to talk about that. I thought of if I were going to have a mascot, it would be Gumby, because they were trying to stretch the limits. And so we are going to talk about all those things quite a bit in this presentation. Do you want to talk about the NUMA aspects?
Yeah. Biggest thing, we're going to go into NUMA in depth in a little bit, but if you find a VM actually could benefit from hyperthreading, there is a way to actually go turn this on, prefer HT.
But the point was that they felt it was better to emphasize NUMA locality over hyperthreading.
And we're going to do a deep dive on that here soon.
Okay? And in fact, if you look at vSphere 6.5, a lot of investments have been made in NUMA. In fact, to quote you, we were talking about the fact that just by sizing by the NUMA boundaries, what was about 40, 50% performance improvement?
Yeah, between 30 to 50% just by getting the NUMA balancing right.
So crossing NUMA boundaries results in a NUMA hit, okay? More cores artificially inflated by hyperthreading is not better. And that goes counter to what you hear a lot. Now, I'm not telling you to run out and turn on preferred HT. What I'm telling you is in certain scenarios, those hyperthreads aren't necessarily the best option. And in fact, you talked about the fact that VMware tools, how important it is.
Keep it up to date, please. In my consulting business, more times than not, I see these things out of date. There are bug fixes, there's performance improvements. Keep them up to date. It's non-disruptive at this point.
So how many people realize you get the VMXNet driver from VMware tools? You get the Paravirtual SCSI driver. You get disk timeouts. You get the balloon driver. That's a bag of goodness. And the best part is, it's not Oracle. There's not a price tag associated with it.
It's free.
You get it. You already paid for it. Right? Isn't that kind of nice? But you do have to keep it up to date. And in fact, right, keep it, the bottom line, keep VMware tools up to date. This is a survey that gets done by the IUG, the Independent Oracle Users Group, every year. And what you see out of this is 70% of that audience, which runs Oracle mostly and SQL Server, is running on vSphere. And that doesn't surprise me. And so I love this. Clearly, Gartner in 2016 updated. VMware is the big dog, right? They are the hypervisor of choice, and Hyper-V is coming up close behind, but it's still VMware's game, definitely at the high end for performance, capability, ease of use. It would be my first choice. It would certainly be yours. Is that safe to say?
Safe to say.
And so I am from Boston, so you got to have a cheers slide. Anybody know what the VCDX is? I think of it as the doctorate of virtualization. Anybody that's got that accreditation, hats off to them, because they worked really hard for it.
Yes.
But when you graduate, you actually do get a bottle, a six-pack of VCDX ale. I've had an opportunity to have some, so that's actually a real bottle. Oh, Spidey's in. I'm a Spidey fan. And so I find this really interesting because Oracle is no longer the big dog when it comes to databases according to Gartner. The second year in a row. And I'm frankly not surprised. Are you surprised by this?
I'm not surprised at all.
But he never runs an Oracle database. Moi has run Oracle databases. It's a great database. But when you look at SQL Server's package since about 2005, SQL Server's really raised its game. It can give Oracle a run for its money. What it doesn't have, which the Oracle guys are going to tell you, is it doesn't have active-active.
We have really close, though.
Really? Oh, you like that? Really? But they don't have it. They don't have it, okay? But active-active, my problem with active-active to the Oracle guys, and I am one, is what does a paint store need Oracle Rack for? Do you think if that paint store goes down, it really is the end of the world? And so I believe it's great technology. It's the most oversold technology in the world. So let's talk, this thing is going to get very progressively more technical. Damn Windows. Why do you get this? Any ideas?
I put in a...
Wait, come on, speak up. Drivers, man, I wish I had a book to give you. Come down to the Navisite booth, 2012, say you want a book. Get you right to the front of the line.
Yep. Or there's a registry hack where you can manually initiate a blue screen of death for testing purposes only.
And how many times have you used it?
Many
And how many
times.
practical jokes have you been able to play?
I plead the fifth.
So we all know bad drivers. It's really funny as a side note. We get a Christmas card from the body shop. My wife is a really bad driver, and she's not here. Now, I'm not talking the one that they buy for everybody and send out. I'm talking one that's personally selected for us with a personal note signed by everybody. That's how much business we've given the body shop over the years. But it's right, it's drivers, because in a non-virtualized setting, you can't vet everything. And so the business case, this is really a reference slide, winner, winner, chicken dinner. I had this comment made by an Oracle expert, and I thought this was really telling. Do we even need Oracle Enterprise Edition when you're on pure storage? And the point is that the game is changing with the cloud, and the game is changing with these new, as virtualization gets better and better, maybe some of the choices you made in the past are better choices when you look at the cost-benefit analysis. All right, and the bottom line, show me the money. The reason VMware took off was utilization. I can pack twice as much on those servers, get the job done, and save a lot of money. The problem is, when we do a database consolidation, you do them all the time. What's the typical consolidation ratio?
25, 30 to 1.
Oh my God.
Physical machine.
Oh, okay, I was just going to say, yeah.
But on a vCPU level, 2.5 to 3 to 1.
So here's the reality. We can go to most organizations, we can cut your database footprint in half, and in theory, you could go back to the Oracle rep and say, hey, I need half as many databases. I'll tell you what happens. You don't save any money. Because they go, oh, you lose that volume discount. And guess what? The price is more. That's just how it works. But you don't have to buy any more. So you can expand.
And then we can help you convert Oracle to SQL Server.
David, what do you feel about CPU hot plug?
Just like this photo back in the day, it's a really bad idea.
Dude,
yeah, that is me.
That is David. He made the mistake of letting me see it one day. All right? But the point is that when you use hot plug, you disable NUMA. If you walk away with anything from this session, the value of NUMA is so important. As you said, you're seeing 30 to 50% using your words, performance increase by just tinkering with NUMA, which is really easy to do. We're going to talk about ways to do that. So if you walk away with anything, dude, bad idea. And by the way, that photo on the right I took when I was in Budapest, Hungary. And that guy was just walking the streets. I don't know what he was smoking. I thought he was from Denver. But he seemed happy with himself, and I had to take that picture. Never seen anything like that. That dude, he's got it coming, right? He's got it all. Yeah, I think he's still in the 80s. I don't think he's ever left the 80s. But it's just not a good idea. So some of these capabilities just aren't a good idea. All right, Oracle hot add memory. So there's all these issues. First of all, bloating the SGA. How do you feel about bloating? How do you feel about bloating a VM?
Use what you need. Don't bloat it.
Right. Old school DBAs want to get as much as they can and squirrel it away for the day they'll need it. But in a shared environment, that works against you. So whenever you bloat something, you're taking resources away from others that could use it. And you're actually, safe to say, hurting your own performance.
Guaranteed.
Okay, but in the case of Oracle, you would have to oversize the SGA so that when you added it, it could take advantage of it. That's just a terrible idea. So yeah, you know Cyber Monday's coming, you're a retail operation, you say, gee, I'll just bloat the SGA the next time I bounce it a month earlier. Just a really bad idea. Just architecturally how Oracle works, right? It's going to start up the database and allocate the memory. Size it correctly. If you really have to change it, bounce it. Okay, let's talk about the hypervisor. Is that a fair number on the overhead?
That's high.
So what I find really interesting is I used to hear from people all the time that the overhead of virtualization. So we both believe that 2 to 3% overhead is conservative, right? I mean, that's very conservative. Yeah. This case study was done on a Hadoop setting where they actually showed that virtualizing had lower overhead than physical. Now, I'm not going to argue whether that's right or wrong. What I'm going to tell you is it proves the point that the overhead is really low. And when you look at the benefits you get, I mean, you could rattle off the benefits of virtualization.
Guaranteed.
Yeah, I mean, okay, this is a study that came out a while ago, and I find it really so interesting. So they took an Oracle RAC database, Node A, active-active. Second database instance, Node B, active-active, right? Third database instance, and they started vMotioning them. A to B, B to C, C back to A, all under a load. Nothing broke at all. When I started looking at this, I thought, I don't know of another hypervisor that's done that test. I'm not sure they could survive the test. And also, vMotion's been around since 2003, 14 years. It's rock solid. You can worry, it doesn't matter what the load is, it's going to work. You want to talk about the predictive side of things?
As long as you're running vRealize Operations Manager, any edition, vSphere 6.5 actually has proactive HA and proactive DRS. If it detects that the hardware is starting to have problems, it can actually evacuate a host for you and take it down. DRS, predictive load balancing. If things automatically spike up in the middle of the night with all the stuff that we as DBAs do, it can actually detect this and load balance ahead of those tasks.
This is a huge game changer, but there are some cautions here, right? Licensing. You got to make sure that it doesn't wake up and move it someplace you don't want it to go because you don't want to pay the bill, right? You really have to be prepared for that. But this is where this technology's headed, where it's going to move itself and see things before the problem happens. This is just great. And this is one of the newest features. And of course, Zoltar, the monster VM, is there telling us about it. But you have to have VROPS, which costs money. Okay, this one I always find interesting because it's so interesting. We had a healthcare operation that did critical medical systems. And when the systems went down, it could mean somebody's life in the hospital. And they couldn't use more than 50% of the available memory on the SQL Server database instance, all right? And when we looked and troubleshot the problem, we found out there was a BIOS setting. So we went back to the customer, we said, we want to reboot the system for 5 minutes. Can't take down the system, we can't lose it for 5 minutes. We tried 4 times. They said no over about a 3-week period. I went and got involved. I looked at the environment. I saw a standalone SQL Server database instance on direct attached storage with no redundancy whatsoever. Yet the system could never go down. Right? Just like the fish, right? It's just a setup for failure. He couldn't take that fish in, and guess where he ended up? Fossilized. Right? And so it really talks about this whole idea when failure is not an option. And I call it the fact that when management's expectations concerning the I love that picture of that kid. He's got it all. Concerning the availability of database monster VM and physical infrastructure and the ability to support it. Too often as DBAs, we let management think one thing when we know the reality of the other. You need to have that conversation. You need to say, look, in order to make the system redundant, this is the investment. It's $500,000. Management says, no way. Okay, but if it goes down, it may go down for 8 hours. A, you're not going to lose your job. B, you've set reasonable expectations in place. You know, they should have that kid when he's like 12 do that picture. You ever seen those ones where they do the pictures years later? That would be a great remake. And so the elephants in the room, as professionals, get the resources you need or reset the expectations. It's simple as that. You must see this all the time.
All the time. And things are either undersized or oversized. We need flash storage. People are given thumb drives. I mean, things are just not good.
And so you want to talk about the good intention BIOS settings? And
there's a lot of things inside the BIOS that are there by default. Things like power savings. You're already going green because you're virtualizing and consolidating. Don't artificially slow things down. So set the BIOS to high performance. If you're on UCS, set it to enterprise. Enable hyperthreading. The hypervisor will actually ignore it until it really needs it. Hardware virtualization features, enable NUMA in the BIOS, set CPU snoop to home snoop. This is the best setting for
this is a new one. This is a really good one.
Yeah, CPU snoop to home snoop. If you're on a brand new, and I do mean brand new chip, experiment with cluster on die, but most of the time we find that home snoop works better.
Hard limits are hard limits and you want changing them. So you can overcommit all you want, but ultimately that's your limit. That's the funnel everything goes through. And then I just love this one, right? If you had 99% availability, but you were down for 3 days, you met your availability target, but you failed. You think management would be okay with being down 3.65 days in a row? You had 99% availability. What's the problem? It's called common sense. Yes, we as professionals have to map the reality of what we want, but 99% availability, I guarantee you they would not be happy with being out of business for 3.65 days. So you hit the target, but you failed. Okay, let's get into lessons learned in production and consolidation don't necessarily carry through. So when people started virtualizing, right, it was all about consolidation.
Yeah, and consolidation drove virtualization back in the beginning.
Right? And so one day you put a database out there that wants lots of CPU memory, right? And it brings it to its knees. Because it wasn't built with performance in mind. And there's a difference between consolidation and performance. And so we're going to go on the path of virtualization. So in this photo are quite a few people. As you can see, there's a guy who's in the doghouse. He used to work for VMware. Mike, anybody know Mike Webster? Mr. Nutanix? He left VMware, so he's in the doghouse, so he's Toto the dog. Now he's a New Zealander. I'm sure Toto was a Australian version. There's Don Sullivan, who you see, Mark Amiachek, if you can see any of his presentations, Cannon. There are all these people, Jeff, over the year who helped with this presentation. I want to make sure that everybody knows the community built this presentation. Never mind the many hours that David and I put into this. So let's go to the path of virtualization. How do you feel about reading the documentation? Do you ever read the documentation?
I always read the documentation.
Wait. I always read the documentation. He's one of the smartest son of a guns I know.
You want to know why? Latest version of Power CLI came out. We found an undocumented thing. There's a free white paper up here that we just wrote that shows you how to capture production error states. Poorly documented, we show you how to do it. It's linked clones for production VMs. All because of the release notes.
And by the way, if you're at the beach, there's a book you can read, light reading, put you right to sleep. Not a problem, enjoy the beach day. And there's a great performance white paper that's still the latest that we would recommend. There's great websites. VMware does an outstanding job in terms of their blogs. And so you can go back to this presentation. We've got all the links on how to get there. There's the VMsig for the Oracle community that's trying to get off this pass. How many people have ever heard of SQL Saturday? I am always amazed. Would you explain to this audience what a SQL Saturday is?
Imagine this. All the people that write the books and blog posts and the videos fly in from around the world to speak at a tech conference on a Saturday for free. We get a t-shirt, maybe. It's free. You do this on a weekday, most people are going to be there because they're not going to want to work that day. You do it on a Saturday, people are there because they want to learn. We as teachers want to teach. It's an incredible experience all day, world-class information, and I guarantee you there's one at a city near you at some point over the year.
And what do they charge the attendees to attend?
Free. Usually, if you want to, you can pay about $10 for lunch.
So all day long, I'll give you an example. Orlando will have 1,200 people. They'll run, what, 6 or 7 sessions an hour?
They'll run actually 10 an hour for 8 hours.
One-day event, high quality, specifically more focused on the SQL Server side of things, but they go into big data. They get into a lot of things. Oh, yeah. Highly recommend it. I'm always amazed. And they run everywhere in the world. So if you went from Bucharest, Romania, yes, you can get to a SQL Saturday.
I want to do one in Transylvania, because that would be cool.
Bratislava, actually in Romania, I think is where that is. Performance white papers. I was actually there once. Interesting place. Performance white papers. These are great papers. You can get the links later. Reference slide. Okay, that's my blog. That's an easy way to find me, my name. That's David. All right, lots of great material. All through this deck are links of code segments that David has created. I am very lucky to have David on my team. Long White Clouds, that's Mr. Nutanix. You can tell him you saw him as a dog from Australia and piss him off, and that's okay. Mike's a great guy. Actually, that's what, in the top 25 virtualization websites every year.
Every year.
Top 25 sites on VMware. I mean, great site. Okay, this is just great places to go. This is focused on SQL Server. That's focused on Oracle. There's a link, specifically, whichever side of the house you're on. Okay, I love this because this is what's new, right? What's changed, and a lot's changing. And what's new in performance. That's fresh off the press. That one, I believe, came out in March of this year. You want to comment on this book because we both love this book.
Yeah, go get this at the store right now. As soon as you leave here, go get his free book and then go buy this one. If you want to know anything about virtual machine NUMA or memory management, this is the book to go buy.
So I am an author of a book, and I think that's an outstanding book. And by the way, mine would look good next to it on your bookshelf. Just saying. But, but it's a great book, and it covers, and wouldn't you say it goes way beyond vSphere?
Oh my goodness. I mean, 99% of the book is just good hardware virtualization, CPU, memory management. I mean, you want a deep dive on NUMA, that is the book.
Okay, so we both agree that the installation is so important, but more importantly, baselining. How do you feel about baselining?
If you don't have baselines, you're not doing it right, because when I go to you and you tell me it's running slow, I'm going to ask you, how's it running when it's running well? And nobody ever can give me that answer.
Well, what's the question you like to ask?
Yeah, the question is, what's it doing? What is the VM doing well? What's it like when everything's okay?
Yeah, how many people know what's it like when everything's okay? Really knows. You're the rarity, really, and I commend you. you, because most people don't know. But our point is, before you take a monster VM, before you take a production database and virtualize it, or if you're virtualizing it, you need to baseline it. And we're going to drive this point home. What are the I/O requirements, right? But it's critical for monster VMs. What's the backup strategy? Have a plan. Okay? Oh, that was interesting. So if your application code what?
Sucks. Everybody repeat it after me. Sucks.
Yeah, I know when my database is slow because 95% of the time it's the application code. I'm just saying, all right? That's been my experience after 30-something years of doing it. I want to know what the problem is, I go to the application code. So if your physical environment doesn't perform well, why would your virtualized environment perform well when you virtualize it? Unless something's changed. If we hire the same politicians every year, why do we expect something different out of them? Right? So the bottom line, the IT food groups, that's what I like to think of, disk, CPU, memory, and network. The monster VM is very clear. He wants more or she wants more resources now. And so you've got to look for your choke points, and there are only 4. And statistically, where's the most likely choke point?
Storage.
And do you know what the odds are?
On average, 4 times out of 5, it's storage.
According to VMware support, I think it's over 80%, we'll actually have the number, of the issues are from the storage array being misused, misaligned, misused. So if you're a betting person, that's a bet, the best place to start looking. So a good baseline is important to understand what's normal behavior so you know where to start looking. Okay, and when you baseline a database?
Yeah, when you baseline all this stuff, if you have a 1-hour granularity on it, that's a joke.
It's just going to smooth it out.
Yeah, my personal preference, 15 to 30 seconds. And this is why when you look at the vCenter stats, after about a day, they start to get really ugly. The peaks start to shrink. It's not good.
So all that's going to happen if you baseline every hour is when you go to buy your VMware licenses, you're not going to buy enough. Do you think they're going to cry at you when you have to come back and buy more in a hurry? They're not. So it's really important to have those small sample sets, and in fact, it goes right back where you said 15 seconds or less, T-SQL 1 minute or less. And in fact, if you want to go as low as possible, in fact, these are your words, right? By core, by Numino, by drive, by disk controller.
I want stats off of everything because these little tiny things matter, and if you don't have them and any one of these are a problem, you're going to wish you had them.
Okay, and then this is really interesting. When you baseline a monster VM, you've got to have 2 criteria. If it's high performance, then you want to look at that VM at its highest peak because that's what you want to size to. If it's consolidation, then you want to look at an average. Once again, are you looking for performance or consolidation? How you baseline will get slightly different. And these are all reference slides. Basically, and there's David, 2 geeks in a truck, right? He's moving that monster VM because that's what he does for a living every day. And you can go back to these, and there's lots of reference points and good guides. But with 120 slides, I really don't want to spend a lot of time on them. They're all there in detail. If you disagree with something, you've learned something, share it with us.
Yes.
Really, we don't mind. We'll give you credit. And so we got perfmon counters, all right, KPIs. And so we're running 4 minutes behind schedule. That's our halfway point. Congratulations, you've survived 60 slides. Not bad. I assume most people know where this is. That's Washington, D.C.
He's also a really good photographer.
And so, alert, Silicon Valley News. Would you like to comment on this one?
Oh, my goodness. The biggest FUD out there is that Oracle is not supported on VMware.
Oh, my God, I heard this twice at the conference.
Yeah. Nothing is.
Does anybody in this room, will you admit it now that I've made a point of it, will you admit that you think Oracle's not supported? There's a MetaLink article. It's as easy as it gets. And still, people are believing it. How do you know if your Oracle salesperson's lying to you? Their lips are moving. Yeah, baby. Right? That's how they keep their job. They go to toe the corporate line. They're not bad people. Right? And of course, you got the disk. It's great. It's going to be great. It's terrific. Right? But these are all classic lies. It costs more to license Oracle software in VMware. These are fake news, baby. And it's been beat to death over and over, and people still drink that Kool-Aid. Okay, IOPS. In the Oracle side, anybody ever heard of SLOB? Silly little Oracle benchmarking, Kevin Clausen. Great guy, he's on Twitter. You can talk to him, it doesn't cost you a dime. If you want, you can buy the Oracle versions of things like Replay, or you can use Kevin's tool, and it even works for the flash arrays. And in fact, there's a great place to go. You want to talk about, yes.
Same thing goes with SQL Server. If you want to go test a storage array for similar SQL Server workload patterns, you can use disk speed. We've got a tool out here for disk speed batch, just PowerShell wrapper to help you automate it. But remember, none of these tools, SQL Server, Oracle, whatever, these will not simulate your SQL Server workloads. If you're on SQL Server 2012 or above, you have a tool called Distributed Replay. It comes with it. It's free. You can actually capture a production workload through a bunch of different methods, process it, replay it against a backed up copy of this database on another machine, and you can actually simulate your workload on something else. So system changes, new hardware, anything. You can actually establish your baseline that way.
Do you see how passionate he was about that? Yeah. That's how important baselining is. And it's a shared environment. You got to talk to the infrastructure people. You got to communicate what they need. If you ask for 12 vCPUs, they shouldn't give you 8. Right? And so I talk about the fact that it's a shared environment and both sides have to communicate. And one of the tricks when you're first going down is to basically use a tool to measure the IOPS. Because if they didn't give you the IOPS you need, you're wasting your time to install anything. And back and educate them. Work with the infrastructure people to get the information you need because they have it. How do you feel about P2Vs? Wait, that's the official.
Yes, that's the official term. If you're P2Ving this stuff, you're doing it wrong. DBAs can migrate the databases and all the other stuff that comes along with it really easily. If it's an old legacy machine that you just need to virtualize and park it in a corner, maybe turn off the database instance first or else you run problems. But otherwise, just migrate the data. It's
we had
so much cleaner.
Hospital in Boston, 2,500 SQL Server database instances they P2V'd. All they did was oversize everything and was getting terrible performance. When we actually baseline, we cut the footprint way down. The installation guide, same as the physical, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you have a best practice for your SQL Server or Oracle environment, it still applies. It's still a computer. You still have to go do these things.
vSphere does not change the operating system in any way, shape, or form. It behaves the same. So the same installation guide. Mastering Monster VMs, Volume 1, 2, and 3. Okay, I love this slide. You want to spend, we got to be careful, but spend a minute on this.
I love this. I want a profile of what your actual workload can actually do. This is great. Run perfmon for a week. Check this out. This customer did index maintenance at midnight. They did backups following after that. We did a batch load about 3 a.m. 9 a.m., every single person had to be on site, so at 9:05, we got this big resource spike. Then it went quiet when everybody took a break. The company catered in lunch every single day for free, so everybody worked over lunch right there. And then they all went home early, and then they got home, ate, and then worked at night, and then we kicked off reporting. You can't make this stuff up.
But even your database doesn't run at 100%, and if it does, you're hosed. That's the official term. So let's talk about design. Do you want your production database stuck in traffic? Because that's what it's like in Boston. That's like it's like anybody from Washington, D.C.? I feel so sorry for you because that's what it feels like. You're that monster VM behind that slow bus going, get out of the way, right? Timeout. Monster VMs do not play well with others. Right? And in fact, you want to talk about maximum, I mean, there are so many issues, but go ahead.
So many things. You're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for database server licensing. Get the web servers off of there. Get the file servers. Get dev and test off of there because it's eating resources that you're paying a lot of money for. Dev test licenses for this stuff don't cost much. Get it off of there. Dedicated resources for prod.
And that's our point. Separate those production critical databases. Separate them on separate hosts if you can. But when you actually think of what you're paying, and I think you said it beautifully, and memory reservations are also well appreciated. So always put it on a separate VM, and the fringe side, right, tune at a VM level, vMotion at a VM level, memory reservations at a VM level, troubleshoot at a VM level.
Resource allocations in one spot instead of multiple. Now, if you're constrained by licensing, we might fudge on this, but this is the ideal situation. One
application's worth of databases per VM. That's our golden rule. This is just the running multiple instances on the same VM, use max server memory, reference. So let's talk about storage. The monster VM, why am I always waiting so long for a response, right? And I think this is your line. Why don't you read the one in the bottom?
Yeah. The bottom line is, when was the last time you had to do a 0 to 60 in nothing? Biggest thing there, everybody always claims IOPS are king. Latency really matters. The speed that you can write to disk, not necessarily the maximum thing that your array is rated at.
And so there's always this argument of VMFS versus RDMs. The answer is, this is actually an updated slide. They perform the same, and there are certain use cases. You want to talk about those?
Me personally, I would only want to see an RDM if you're having to do a traditional SQL Server failover clustered instance with shared storage. Otherwise, virtual disk at all times.
Future ready is your application. How do you feel about eager-thick 0?
Do it unless you're on an all-flash array. If you're on an all-flash array baseline, because the array just ignores the zeros anyway.
But it's the idea, we call it the first write penalty. You don't want to slow down the database waiting for the first write penalty. And so, in fact, you talk thin provisioning. The problem we both see with it is oversubscription. You're giving the database disk space that doesn't necessarily exist. And one day it needs it, and it can't get it, and everything blows up. And cloud providers love to sell you thin provisioning because you're paying for something you don't actually get. We're going to do questions at the end. I apologize because we won't make it through the slides. And this is in the context of a mission-critical load.
Yeah. Now, thin provisioning, if you're monitoring this properly, meaning active alerting if things grow, free space, that sort of thing, on all-flash, big if, be careful.
That's the monster VM. I'm sorry it had gas. I couldn't do anything about it. But the point is right. Thin provision, if you're on all-flash array, works okay. You want to go through the storage best practices?
Storage best practices. These arrays are very sensitive to queue depths, and a lot of times the defaults inside VMware are a lot lower than what the arrays can actually handle. So boost the queue depth with testing, of course, inside the array. I want active multipathing. I want the pair of virtual SCSI drivers to be used because the default queue depth is a lot higher. Latest VMFS version, absolute lowest possible latency to disk all the way through the infrastructure stack. Guaranteed is what you need. Pure's actually got a really good array guide right here. It doesn't just apply to Pure. These are actually good best practices for a lot of really fast arrays out there.
But notice the round robin. We're saying go from 1,000 to 1. Every I/O, let it round robin.
Round robin PSP policy from 1,000 to 1. Just research your array. Chances are it supports it. Just do it.
And the Pure Storage Array Best Practice Guide is excellent, outstanding, and applies to everybody. I would get it. Doesn't cost you a dime. The Paravirtual SCSI adapter, 30% CPU savings, 12 to something plus % in terms of I/O, up to 30. It comes with VMware tools, run the latest version, and everything gets faster. There is the issue of you might have to have multiple, up to 4 virtual SCSI adapters.
Use all 4. Windows and Linux and VMware all do I/O coalescing, not by drive, but by disk controller. Use all 4. You get more channels out of the virtual machine itself through the hypervisor to disk. It does make a performance improvement.
For high-performance workloads.
Yes.
Right, so 4 straws are faster than 1. Anybody have a margarita with 4 straws knows this and learns the lesson of what happens when you do that too many times. Having been there. So here it is. Greater than 80% of the issues in a virtualized environment are caused by storage misconfigured, missized, misused. Okay, let's talk about the processor. I'm going to talk about a virtual CPU. So I love the fact that most people don't really understand what hyperthreading is. That's a hyperthread being shown. It's still one processor. It's flipping back and forth and getting you about a 20% uplift. You can go to the actual provider. Some people claim it's 25, but I'm saying conservatively 20%. But it's only one. In a CPU-intensive workload, that flip-flopping, in the case of Project Capstone, was hurting you. It wasn't working to your advantage. So if you've got a CPU-intensive workload, hyperthreading isn't necessarily the best thing for you. It's still only one processor. And in fact, I would argue that if you have 5 physical CPUs, you should count a hyperthread as 6 to be conservative. Yeah. And in fact, we both agree, common knowledge, VMware and Microsoft both support 2-to-1 overcommit.
Yep, 2-to-1 overcommit. What we say is do 1-to-1 until you start understanding your workload characteristics. As soon as you do that, you can provision more. There's some metrics we're going to talk about here in a minute that will actually objectively show you what this overcommit ratio can and should be. But for the gate, just be careful, be conservative. This is not a VDI environment where you can do 10 to 1.
But once you understand what the workloads are, start overcommitting. Who do you think's in the room? Did Larry show up? Larry Ellison, is he out there? I hear the music. So Larry Ellison made a statement to the world that he will make Oracle Cloud cheaper than everyone else. And so he doubled the price of everyone else. I'm not making this up. So if you're on AWS or you're on Azure and you use hyperthreading, you pay twice the money. Now, you just learned that a hyperthread is a 20% uplift. Why would you pay double for 20% more performance? Shut it off. Then you're not really paying that, what I'll call the Oracle tax, one of many Oracle tax. The other thing, anybody ever heard of a company called License Fortress? You should. If you are licensing Oracle, they have the nicest license solution I've seen in years. Real-time alerting when you violate your license, money-back guarantee. They're in the HP pavilion on the right, and they're a little vendor, but they got a big solution that would save the average Oracle customer a lot of money, and I really like the Straight Talk. You've been at the Straight Talks and lights. Have you ever gone to those? Yeah. They're outstanding. Sorry, we have to poke fun. You want to talk about ready time?
I could spend 3 hours on this. In fact, we actually did when I taught the SQL Server on VMware Bootcamp on Saturday. Yeah, we actually spent that long on it. Essentially, what ready time here is, this is the amount of time that a virtual CPU request spends in the hypervisor before it gets to the CPU. Lower is better. More time here means it's not doing what you're asking it to do. The fun thing here is you can actually calculate this and look at the actual gross impact on this particular virtual machine. If you go to, it's in the chart options under ready. Latest for the entire VM, just ignore it. I want to look at the actual CPU count. So 22, 9, 5. That's the number of milliseconds over a 20-second polling interval. Do the math. This shows you how to do it. What you're going to find is that in most cases, you're looking at 0.5%, 1% performance penalty. Now, if you're on some of the other platforms where things are just all wrong, I've seen this as bad as a 93% performance hit.
So it's really simple. The VM was ready and the host couldn't service the request.
It's ready to go.
Ready to go, but the answer was no.
Yep.
Oh, I like
here's
that.
another one. The bigger the VM, the more you have to worry about the CPU schedulers actually getting synchronized under the hood. In this case, we have a 4 vCPU example here, 8-core VM. So in essence, I got 4 CPU schedulers, I got 4 tasks, I got one really big parallelizable query, and I say go. Okay, one is way out ahead of the other. That's going to cause things like error states. It could actually cause things to go unstable. So the hypervisor actually detects this, and it will actually see it, and it'll stop it, and it'll let the others catch up. The act of this is called CPU Co-Stop, or SMP co-scheduling stop. And now it resumes, and life goes on. It's really cool. But there's not many people that know this. VMware doesn't even collect this in the vCenter database. This is only there for the real-time 1-hour view, which is fetched directly from the host. You can actually go calculate this yourself. You can go see it. Same spot as ready time, same percentage as ready time. But realistically, if I see little spikes like this, it's no big deal.
And by the way, that's how a database works. It loves to take and parallelize those executions.
Everything.
And so if you set it for 4, which is in that example, it's going to use all 4. And so Co-Stop becomes a real problem in certain situations.
Yeah, and I'm not even looking at this in the percentage viewpoint. If I see sustained Co-Stop in here at any point in time, or a really big spike between all the CPUs, something else is going on in that environment, and that VM basically just hung for that number of seconds. It's not good, and nobody knows this, and there's no good way to alert upon this. So go check this out in your environment. The bigger the VM, the more you have to worry about it. Demand versus entitlement's another one. You want a canary in a coal mine? Entitlement is based on the CPU consumption on the host. This is how many CPU megahertz are available to that VM at peak. Demand is, if there were no CPU scheduling, this is what the demand would actually need. So the line down at the bottom is demand, the line up top is entitlement. If that actually gets close, that's a canary in a coal mine. You're about to experience problems.
And in fact, I like the slide that says, what would the VM consume if no CPU convention, if no CPU limit set? Because there are ways to throttle things just like your BIOS.
Yep. Now this is a slightly overloaded VM. It's kind of hard to see on here, but you can see this ripple up here is actually demand, and that line right there is entitlement. That machine was really suffering. Now this is a steady state. That's pretty constant. You turn around and random slowness is even worse because you kind of feel like that. This was everything was kind of on the brink, and then something big happened and it spiked way up, the event ended and went back down. This is even harder and even more maddening because this is random. And then this is a routine hit where everybody in the environment knows, yeah, about every 15 minutes things just slow down for a couple of minutes. That's why. This is how you can see this. And it's easy to see, really easy to see.
Let's talk about memory, NUMA. So what I like about this is an illustration of, as I was trying to understand NUMA years ago, I created this and I really think it's a very useful way to look at it. If you've got and in my example is 6 CPU sockets, I've got a cache of memory, non-NUMA memory access associated with those. If I can get my VM to fit in that memory cache, it will be 30 to 50% faster. So by right-sizing your VMs, you increase the likelihood that you're going to fall in that NUMA node. It's really hard for me to see these without my glasses. Hard to talk to a slide if you can't see it. So basically the point is, by right-sizing your VMs, you can fit within that NUMA cache. You avoid the cross-connects. It's 30 to 50% faster. It's a no-brainer. And in fact, in the case of preferred HT, right, they were downplaying hyperthreading and upplaying NUMA to get the ultimate performance on a 480-thread system. That's how important NUMA is. And so I like to use the example of 4 sockets, 6 cores, 4 NUMA nodes, 128 gig. Each NUMA node has approximately 32 gig. There is overhead for managing NUMA. I don't know what that is. I don't think it's ever published. But let's assume you have 31.5 gig. If you can make your VM fit within that, you get optimal performance. And we're talking huge gains. And 6.5 is all about NUMA. That's a major part of what they did. And then I added this one on the left because every NUMA topology is different and vendors are experimenting with it. So don't just assume there's lots of ways they can slice and dice NUMA. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, there's an interesting change in vSphere 6.5. We used to say to let VMware manage NUMA automatically, you set X number of sockets with 1 core per. Well, on 6.5, what it actually does is you go set cores versus sockets, and it just ignores it. It actually sets what it thinks is best. Well, the problem here is for a big database server, what it thinks is best may not be the optimal configuration. It gets it right most of the time. But every once in a while, you might find this that doesn't work. So there's a blog post here, ignore the clickbait title, but it actually shows you how to go manually override these settings to go set it the way you want.
But really what they've done in 6.5 is decouple cores per socket from virtual NUMA topology. And in fact, there's also another link where they explain the changes really well. Frank does a really nice job of that. It's the best I've seen, and I think his book is just even more complimentary to that. Soft NUMA, you want to talk about?
Another interesting thing. You think you get cores per socket, right? Well, SQL Server 2016 now says if you have over 8 cores per NUMA node, well, it might just automatically subdivide it on its own. So you got to watch for this in the error log. It's called soft NUMA. So I don't know. I mean, based on your workload, it might be easier to manually override the cores per socket and present a smaller core count per NUMA node, per virtual NUMA node, so that it doesn't have to do this.
So let's talk about the obvious. That's a rock, right? We all know ballooning, memory compression, swapping, slow you down. Ballooning, there was this, going across the internet, you should shut off ballooning. You should absolutely not shut it off. Yeah. It's your first line of defense of a system that's having memory issues.
Yeah, just don't over-provision memory. You never have to worry about it.
In a perfect world, the production database set memory reservations, don't overproduce it. So basically, allocating too many resources can slow it down. Bloated VMs can slow you down. So memory reservations are awesome for production workloads that have to get performance. Yeah. And in fact, we're going to show you an example that I really like, the vSwap file. Notice it's 0. There's a memory reservation. It knows it's never going to have a memory issue.
Yeah, if you're never going to swap, reserve all guest memory. It sets the swap file to 0. We saved 8 terabytes of all-flash RAM at one customer environment just by checking a box.
That's huge. This is just a good reference slide for the accidental DBA or the DBA from MaxSQL memory settings. So large pages, we've been a huge fan of large pages forever.
Yeah, if you're running Enterprise Edition, SQL Server can actually do a 2 meg block of RAM, about a 17% performance hike. Works great, especially on VMware.
And in fact, it's now the default in 6.5. We've been lobbying for this for years. So that's what you're going to get. The problem is if you have memory contention, it's going to take large pages, break them to small pages, so that it can start using some of those memory reclamation techniques. Okay, this is one you might want to walk through. We just got to be quick, though.
Yep, this is interesting.
This is a balloon, by the way.
If you are not reserving all guest RAM and you're under memory pressure, the database administrators can actually do the equivalent of locked pages at the SQL Server layer. SQL Server will not give up RAM. Windows will. It's ballooning. Okay, they don't like each other, and now you just got a blue screen.
So you got to make sure the operating system and the database and the virtual machine are in sync. Oracle, this is a good slide about how to size it up if you're not sure how to create the memory reservation. The SGA, the instance, the operating system, add it all up, add a little bit of a cushion. That would be a good place to start. Don't oversubscribe memory. Friends, don't let this happen to their monster VMs.
Period.
Right? Physical resources are hard limits. Do not have your high-end workloads waiting on everybody else. Networking, jumbo frames. It was interesting, a lot of the hardware vendors for years were saying don't use jumbo frames. And I never agreed with that recommendation. If I can move something in 9,000 bytes versus 1,500 bytes, why wouldn't I? The reason they didn't recommend it was because if you didn't do it correctly on your network, it brought the storage array to its knees. Well, if you don't use something correctly, why are you surprised you get bad results? And so it's just easy to say don't use them. So I'm a huge fan in jumbo frames. And in fact, I would argue with you, oh, and by the way, the reason it was set to 1,500, like the old typewriters, you type too fast, it jammed up, that's what happened to the network. So we've been stuck at 1,500 bytes because of years ago, that's all that would work. So the point here with SQL Server, I would argue for Oracle 8192. If your network supports it end-to-end, without any constriction points, that would be the optimal setting from a database perspective to move the most data quickly. Anything you want to add to that?
Go to the next one, I will. And even if you don't use it for SQL Server, definitely use it on your vMotion network. If you're on 10 gig storage at all, specifically iSCSI Flash, use it. It definitely makes life easier.
And then you probably want to comment on this, putting it all together.
Yes. Bottom line, I want to segregate out traffic here. With database availability groups, with failover clustering, with moving data around, I want to isolate and segregate this stuff. One, I can actually use perfmon to track it properly so you can see just how much is actually moving around. Two, for security reasons. Three, just for isolation because applications are really, really chatty and I don't want that traffic getting stuck in here.
Up to 4 NICs per host for redundancy and performance. And so we've done it with 2 minutes to spare. Please fill out the surveys. That's how we get invited back. We now have about 2 minutes for questions, and we'll be here. We'll answer questions.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Good. I thought that went well.